Thank you for being with us again on the EmeraldPlanet TV. In these very dangerous times of pandemics and natural disasters, we need to look forward as far as where we're going, where we've been, and how we can address the issues of today. We have a gentleman who's been doing this for many years, a true expert and internationally renowned. He is Dr. Thomas E. Lovejoy. He is a university professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences and Policy. Also, he is the scientific director for the Institute for Sustainability Earth at George Mason University. Tom, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Well, great to be back with you.
Glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about your Institute for Sustainable Earth and why at George Mason University.
So it's one of three new institutes that were started about a year and a half ago. And this one is all wrapped around the notion of charting a more sustainable course for humanity. And that's a big, complicated question. And it turns out we have 500 faculty who are interested in contributing to this. So the topic we're going to talk about today will be the subject of the first of some institute seminars starting next week.
That's absolutely fantastic. Looking at this to prevent future pandemics, no company should source from recently deforested land. And of course, that's from any source. Why is that coming to the fore now that we've never heard this before?
So the public hasn't heard it before, but it's certainly existed in both the conservation and the epidemiological community. And, we tend to talk about these things as natural disasters, but they're as much man-made as they're natural. And there are 2 to 4 new viruses that are identified every year. Any one of those could become a pandemic. And they turn up because we have destroyed more forests, built a big highway into a forest, been trading wild animals, have wild animal markets for food. And it's just a matter of time before one of those pops into human populations and then gets out of hand.
Now, looking at Brazil, and we're going to be talking about Amazonia, the Amazon basin. Why are you focused on Brazil, and what does that have to do with the future triggers for maybe pandemics?
So I've spent my life working in the Amazon and on the conservation of the Amazon, but little known to many people is that when I was doing my PhD studying birds, I was also studying the arthropod-borne viruses that they were carrying, like St. Louis encephalitis. So I know these pathogens are circulating naturally in these environments, and disturbing them often sets up opportunities for them to spill over into human populations. And I'll tell you a great story about that later, about yellow fever.
I tell you, this is something I'm looking forward to. But tell us a little more about the Amazon. It's such a huge area. Even in terms of South America, it's a huge area, but also for the world.
So the Amazon is roughly equivalent to the 48 contiguous United States. It's really big. And it encompasses 8 countries. It's the largest tropical rainforest in the world. It's the single greatest repository of biological diversity in the world. It has an incredible number of distinct indigenous peoples and distinct indigenous languages. It's a biological treasure trove, easily damaged and easily flipped into a situation where it could generate a pandemic.
Yeah, and we keep talking about natural disasters, and many times God gets blamed for everything. But actually, most of this is actually triggered by human beings.
That's completely correct. So I like to think of unnatural disasters, or, human and natural synergies creating disasters. Uh, and you're looking here at CO2 emissions from deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. Uh, and look at 2018 and 2019. It's just going up. Uh, and that is, in fact, an invitation to some kind of disease outbreak.
And the whole thing is that at one time it was a giant sump as far as greenhouse gases and carbon. Now it's emitting more than it's absorbing, is my understanding.
Well, that's true. It's still, its standing stock of carbon is enormous. It's like 80 billion tons of carbon.
Mm.
So it's really important that stay in the living forest and in all that biological diversity, because to value the Amazon for its carbon is like valuing a computer chip for its silicon.
I see. Now, looking at this was an amazing number that came up today. 1 acre destroyed every 1 second. It's unbelievable. But looking at, and we're going to go through some of these photographs. Tell us what's actually happening in the Amazon and why it's so devastating, not only to Brazil and Latin America, but also to the world as far as this incessant development and destruction of the rainforest.
Yeah, so most of this so-called development that's going on is actually certainly not sustainable development. And if you do the economics of it, it's only a short-term gain, and then there's a long-term loss. So one of the big issues is that the Amazon makes half of its own rainfall, and that depends on forests and trees and leaves. So this amazing hydrological cycle that provides moisture for the forest, but also to every country in South America except for Chile. And it's gotten to the point where there's so much deforestation, it's really close to a tipping point where the southern and eastern forest will convert into grassland, into savanna from tropical rainforest.
Yeah, and you can see how dry this land is right in front of us. It's now exposed to the sun. And also the transpiration you were talking about just can't happen when it's just, dirt instead of having the native trees there. So and also going to illegal gold mining. Why is this so uh, dangerous and disastrous for the rainforest?
So illegal gold mining happens all over the rainforests of the world and in other places too. And it's all driven by, at one level, very poor people who see it as a way to get ahead. But in fact, they live miserable lives. They basically only have double the income they would have had if they had stayed in their traditional activities. And all the money is being made further up the economic food chain. And a lot of this is illegal gold that gets around the world and then ends up being sold in fancy jewelry stores.
It's almost like the blood diamonds. Is that a good analogy?
It is the exact equivalent to the blood diamonds. Right? So this,
Now,
and then you
this
have
is the
the
road
highway.
you're talking about. Yeah.
So this is the first highway from Brazil through Peru to essentially ultimately the Pacific Ocean. And when somebody builds a road like that, it makes a dent in the forest, but that's not the issue. The issue is what happens because suddenly people can get access to the forest. And then you get all kinds of illegal logging, deforestation for raising cattle, which is really a pretty marginal activity. But when the land is free, you make some money. And so the worst thing you can do in the Amazon is just blindly build a highway. Far better to use the rivers as the transportation system, which has served very successfully for centuries and millennia.
Yeah, and the rivers, when we looked at that map earlier, I mean, they're really going everywhere within the Amazon basin. So there's a few places you really can't get to from there. But looking at the Amazon, and we're going to look at some of the fires that are going on there. So, what is happening to generate these fires in what's supposed to be a very moist uh, rainforest?
So it's actually a very interesting question that you ask because lightning does not start fires in the tropical rainforest because it's too wet. But what has been going on is a synergy between the deforestation and the drying that it creates, and climate change and extensive use of fire to clear the land to raise cattle or grow soybeans or something like that. So you have a negative synergy between those three, and they've really brought the Amazon to the brink of the tipping point.
Yeah, this is just amazing when you see these fires, and when you look at it from the satellites or you're flying over it. I mean, it goes beyond the horizon sometimes, all the burned lands that you see there. But getting to the howler monkey, how does that fit into the pandemic when we're going into 21st century?
So one of the interesting things about yellow fever, which used to be one of the great scourges of the world,
Mhm.
uh, is that there is a cycle that goes on in human settlements, which is easily controlled. You just control the breeding sites of the mosquitoes, but there's another cycle called jungle yellow fever, which is in the canopy of the rainforest, uh, principally with howler monkeys, and other monkeys.
Mhm.
And every once in a while, it will move nomadically through, and a bunch of dead monkeys will end up on the floor of the rainforest. But nobody could figure out how it got into people until somebody I shared an office with when I was a graduate student, named Jorge Boschel, watched some woodcutters bring down a tree, and suddenly they were surrounded with the little blue canopy mosquitoes, which transmit yellow fever, in that case, to people and normally to howler monkeys. So it's sort of the ultimate example of disturbing the environment and getting a pandemic going, like this amazing map, which shows how rapidly the COVID-19 virus spread around the world.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. Tom, we're out of time. Where do you see for the spread of this in the future? And we have about 10 seconds to do that.
So the answer is, in fact, in embracing nature, restoring nature, and being much more sensible about the wildlife trade.
Thank you very much. It's Dr. Tom Lovejoy. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thank you very much once again.